5. Signs you're anchoring in the shadow realms, beyond the 5D hype. There comes a point on the path where the light isn't enough, where love and light affirmations start to sound hollow, where being high vibe becomes a cage instead of a key. If you've ever felt yourself pulling away from the spiritual mainstream, not because you're falling off track, but because something deeper, darker, and more ancient is calling you inward, this message is for you. What you're experiencing is not regression, it's not failure, it's not low vibration, it's anchoring. You're entering a layer of reality that most teachings won't touch because it cannot be polished, sold, or neatly packaged. You are entering the shadow realms. And not just passing through, you are anchoring, rooting, holding a frequency there that is terrifying and liberating all at once. You've heard so much about the 5D lately: love, unity, transcendence, alignment, and that's beautiful, but not complete. What most people miss is that you cannot sustain 5D without integrating what lies beneath it. There is no light without shadow, no awakening without descent, no ascension without embodiment. And if you're a shadow anchor, you're here to do what few others will: hold steady inside the frequencies most people run from. It isn't about spiritual performance, it's about energetic depth. And that depth is where the truth lives.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first sign you're anchoring in the shadow realms is that your path no longer makes sense to others, especially not to other spiritual people. What once lit you up feels like fluff now. Where others chase the high of a blissful meditation, you're in the middle of soul-level contraction. Where they're posting mantras, you're processing ancient grief in silence. You can't relate to the light-speed optimism anymore because you're navigating something real. You're not avoiding pain, you're meeting it, not once, but over and over. You're holding it without flinching. That's not regression, that's initiation. It's not that you're falling behind, it's that you're going deeper than the script allows. The second sign is that your emotions have become multidimensional. You're not just feeling sad, you're feeling timelines. You're grieving for things you never lived through in this body. You're angry and can't pinpoint why. You wake up with tightness in your chest that has nothing to do with your personal life, but everything to do with collective trauma rising through your field. You've become a conduit, a transmitter, a filter for density that doesn't belong to you but moves through you because your system is strong enough to hold it. Others talk about being empathic. You're not just feeling, you're processing for the grid. That's a sacred role, and it's rarely recognized because it's rarely understood. The third sign you're anchoring shadow is that destruction begins to orbit you, not in a toxic, chaotic way, but in a way that clears. People leave, old parts of your identity crack, jobs, relationships, belief systems, all start to collapse without you needing to force it. You don't have to push things away. Your frequency naturally starts repelling anything not built on truth. And it hurts, not because it's wrong, but because it's pure. Purification isn't a peaceful bath, it's a wildfire. You are the flame. And if you've wondered why people get uncomfortable around you even when you're saying nothing, it's because they can feel the mirror you are. The mirror that doesn't reflect who they pretend to be, but what they've tried not to see. That's shadow work in the field. The fourth sign is your time no longer feels linear. You're living on layers. What happened a year ago feels like a dream. What's coming tomorrow feels like a memory. You slip in and out of present moment awareness, not because you're distracted, but because you're anchoring energy across dimensions. You might lose track of time, forget names, feel like a different person from hour to hour. Your mind hasn't broken, it's stretching, making space for a consciousness that was never meant to be confined to one identity, one story, one body. This is what happens when the soul expands inside a human nervous system. It distorts time, it disorients ego, and it reconfigures everything you thought you knew about who you are. And the fifth sign, the most powerful and terrifying of all, is that you no longer fear the void. You don't panic when the light is gone. You don't beg for clarity in the dark. You sit, you breathe, you listen, because you've learned that the void isn't the absence of life, it's the womb of it. That silence isn't emptiness, it's transmission. That nothingness isn't failure, it's the source code. While others try to ascend into the clouds, you've gone into the soil, deep, raw, sacred descent. And in that descent, something unshakable was born, a presence that doesn't need to fix, impress, or convince, a presence that holds, that sees, that knows. So I ask you this now, with no sugar, no filter, no fluff. If anchoring in the shadow is not a detour but the exact place your soul signed up to embody, then what resistance are you still holding against your own role? The silent architects of transformation. Why shadow anchors rewire the world from below. We live in a culture obsessed with visibility. Be seen, be heard, go viral, shine brighter, speak louder. But if you're truly anchoring in the shadow realms, you've already realized your impact isn't about visibility, it's about vibration. You're not the one yelling in the spotlight, you're the one holding the grid while others perform. You don't lead from the front, you lead from beneath, where the foundation is unstable, where the programming lives, where the collective fear hides behind smiles and affirmations. You are not here to be adored, you are here to restructure energy fields so deeply that reality starts behaving differently. Even if no one knows it was you. Shadow anchors are not flashy, they are not influencers in the traditional sense, but what they do, quietly, consistently, invisibly, alters the course of reality. You hold frequency, not for a moment, but for entire seasons. You sit with density others won't even acknowledge. You integrate truth in your body while others are still rehearsing it with their words. And in doing so, you become the energetic bedrock for transformation that lasts. You don't fix people, you don't save them. You recode the field around them so they start to remember their own power. And yet your work often goes unrecognized. This is one of the deepest initiations of anchoring in shadow. You must be okay with not being seen, not because you're invisible, but because what you're doing is beyond perception. You're not working with the surface, you're working with the roots, and root work takes time. It happens in silence, in the unseen layers, in the moments where you're crying in solitude while the rest of the world scrolls past your pain, not because your pain is shameful, but because you're processing for the collective. You feel the tremors before the earthquake, you sense the shifts before they become visible, and still, you stay, you hold. Most people are chasing transformation at the level of the story. Change the mindset, rewrite the narrative, set new goals. But shadow anchors don't touch the story. They go for the code. They sit inside the energetic signature of a belief system, a wound, a distortion, and they hold it in stillness until it begins to unravel itself. This isn't healing as performance. This is healing as infrastructure, and it's some of the most powerful work on the planet. Think about it. When a building is about to collapse, it doesn't matter how pretty the windows are. It matters if the foundation can hold. You are that foundation. You don't care about glittering spiritual aesthetics. You care about what's real, what's solid, what doesn't collapse under pressure. That's why your presence feels grounding, why people come to you when their world is falling apart, even if they ignored you when things were fine. Because your field doesn't flicker, it roots. But here's where the real wisdom comes in. Even though your work is hidden, it is felt. Even when no one thanks you, even when you walk away and think nothing happened, even when you feel like you're not doing enough. The truth is, your presence alone is shifting tectonic plates in people's energy systems. You're pulling suppressed emotion to the surface. You're loosening identities that don't fit. You're dissolving ancestral codes that have kept families stuck for generations. And you're doing it by being true to your path, not by trying to be anyone else, not by chasing recognition, but by sitting in your exact soul position and owning the frequency you're meant to hold. So, what does this require of you? Strength, yes, but not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The strength to stay when it's uncomfortable, the strength to feel deeply without needing to perform it, the strength to trust that your work is doing what it came to do, even when the world looks the same. Because transformation doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips in through the cracks and rewires everything before anyone notices. That's your style, that's your my essence. You don't reset the world by preaching, you reset it by embodying a deeper bandwidth of truth, one that people may not understand but will always respond to. And that's the secret of shadow anchors. Even in silence, your presence becomes a command. It invites, then destabilizes, then rebuilds. Not through force, through frequency. This is something few ever dare to. If you stopped needing the world to validate your impact, what kind of energetic architecture could you actually build? What grid could you install in your life, your community, your lineage, if you fully trusted that your power moves in silence, not for applause, but for recalibration? Figuring the grid, why shadow anchors are designed to disturb, disrupt, and decode energy on contact. You don't enter a room and adapt. You enter and everything adjusts. The air thickens, the mood shifts. People feel something they can't explain, but can't ignore. That's not your ego, it's your field. And it's time you understood what's really happening. When your energy lands somewhere, you're not here to make people feel better. You're here to make people feel realer. You're not a comfort blanket, you're a frequency disruptor. And that's why you've spent so much of your life being misunderstood, avoided, or misread. Because you weren't designed to entertain people's illusions. You were designed to trigger the grid, the energetic blueprint that holds this world together in its current state. Triggering doesn't mean causing harm. It means causing activation. It means forcing what's hidden to rise so it can be dealt with. It means introducing truth into a system that's built to suppress it. And when your energy does this, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't check to see who's ready. It moves on its own intelligence. That's the power of a shadow anchor. You are not light that blinds or light that soothes. You are light that scans, that burns through fog, that restructures reality. The people who can't handle it aren't weak. They're just not ready to meet themselves at the level you demand. Your energy is not neutral. It's coded. It carries messages for people before you even speak. That's why people project onto you, why they lash out, why they idolize you, then turn on you, why they come to you in crisis, then disappear. It's not about you as a person, it's about what your presence does to their unresolved material. You remind people of who they really are, and if they're not ready to face that, you become the villain in their story. But here's the deeper truth. Your energy doesn't just trigger people, it reprograms the field itself. Every interaction you have, every space you enter, every conversation you hold is a portal through which your frequency runs a diagnostic. You're constantly scanning for what's true, what's false, what's real, and what's illusion. And if something doesn't align with the truth you carry, your energy will destabilize it. Not because you're trying to be disruptive, but because the grid doesn't lie, and you've become a living conduit for that truth to move. That's why you've always had to learn things the hard way. Why the normal paths didn't work for you, why mentors couldn't hold your frequency, why group settings often made you shrink, because your power doesn't grow in repetition, it grows in disruption, it expands in moments of breakdown, it reveals itself when the old patterns fall apart, and when you finally stop resisting this, when you stop trying to fix the triggering, you start wielding it as the gift it is. You're not a wound, you're a code. You're not chaos, you're truth in motion. And yes, you disturb people, but you also awaken them. You don't just talk about energy, you move it, you change it, you rearrange it. This is why emotional mastery is everything for you. Because if you don't know how to hold your charge, you'll think it's a curse. But when you learn to direct it, you become unstoppable. Not in a way that dominates, in a way that liberates. Here's what most people won't admit. This world doesn't want to be changed. It wants to be managed, made more comfortable, made more tolerable. But you didn't come to make the system better. You came to show the system doesn't work. That's why you're here. That's why it's never made sense to you. Because you're not part of the illusion. You are the signal that disrupts it. So what do you do with this? You stop hiding, you stop apologizing, you stop explaining your triggers to people who are committed to staying asleep, and you start trusting what your energy already knows. Your power is not something you learn, it's something you allow. And the more you allow yourself to be who you really are, raw, real, unfiltered, the more your frequency begins to rewire the world around you. You don't need to know the outcome. You don't need to map the ripple. You just need to stay in truth. That's the instruction, that's the mission. Because every time you do, you rewrite the field. Every time you own your energy, you give others permission to own theirs. And every time you trigger someone out of illusion, you bring them one step closer to themselves, even if they never thank you for it. So I ask you now, with all the weight of who you are, all the fire you've carried and all the space you've held, if I stopped seeing myself as the disturbance and started recognizing myself as the decoder, what kind of system would I finally stop serving, and what kind of world would I finally begin creating? The shadow frequency blueprint, final initiation of the ones who reset reality through embodiment alone. This is where everything comes together. This is the moment you stop reaching outside of yourself for confirmation and finally understand that your presence alone is the work. You've moved through the fire, through rejection, through confusion. You've questioned your sanity, doubted your gifts, tried to explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand. And now you stand at the threshold of your final initiation, not through ritual or ceremony, but through embodiment. The shadow frequency blueprint doesn't activate through study. It activates through being. And if you've made it this far, it's because your soul already knows that the only thing left to do is become the code. You are not here to talk about change. You are here to be the energetic change that demands recalibration from everything it touches. The moment you stop negotiating with your nature and fully accept your shadow frequency, you become a living instrument of reality restructuring. You don't just shift energy, you overwrite the system. You reset timelines through your decisions. You collapse illusions through your walk. You build new templates by holding a frequency that refuses to compromise for approval. And what is that frequency really? It's truth, embodied, whole, nonlinear, raw, without spiritual makeup, without a mask of humility, not performative, not pretty, not packaged, just real. Shadow frequency isn't dark because it's evil, it's dark because it's unapologetically honest. It doesn't hide behind teachings or tools. It doesn't need complex language, it just is. When you embody this truth, you don't seek to be high vibrational, purely become purely aligned. And alignment, not positivity, is what resets the matrix. This final stage is not about gaining more, it's about removing what's still false. Every story you've carried about being too intense, too weird, too misunderstood, let it go. Every identity you built to survive a world that couldn't hold your frequency, let it collapse. Every apology you've given for your energy, your insight, your presence, let them burn. The world doesn't need your compliance. It needs your clarity. And your clarity comes when you finally drop every reason not to be who you already are. Because here's what happens when you fully embody the shadow frequency blueprint. You become a point of residence so exact, so consistent, so anchored that reality has to adjust to you. You stop shifting to fit the room starts shifting to match your field. You don't bend, you broadcast. You don't mirror, you magnetize. You don't just participate in the transformation, you become the threshold that others must pass through to. People won't always thank you. You might never get credit, but you'll feel it, the ripple, the release, the silent rewiring of timelines around you. You'll feel the ancestors exhale when you break the pattern they couldn't. You'll feel the collective sigh of relief when you embody what others were too afraid to name. That's your reward. Not applause. Alignment. Not followers. Freedom. Not a recognition. Resonance. You are the end of distortion. The beginning of new architecture. A template for truth walking in a world made of fiction. And as you embody this fully, you no longer need to prove anything. Your life becomes your message, your choices become your initiation, your stillness becomes your transmission. You'll walk through chaos and remain unchanged, not because you're detached, but because you are the reset point, and everything either rises to meet you or exits your field. So this is it, the moment you were born for, the silence before the final decision. You've shed layers, you've burned bridges, you've died to your former self more times than you can count, and now all that's left is one question, one truth, one breath. If I fully embodied the frequency I came here to hold, without waiting for permission, without seeking approval, without softening the signal, what world would I create simply by being myself completely? Whatever that answer is, that's your legacy.